People who have taken an Ancestry DNA test and accidentally uncovered a family secret, what was it? Found out that my brother is only my half brother. Our parents, well, who we thought were both our parents, were never married. But my mom has insisted my whole life that my dad is my brother's dad. He never acknowledged my brother, he did me, claiming that the man my mom was living with at the time was probably his father. My mom has always said the other fellow was simply her roommate. Given that my dad was an alcoholic and chronic liar, and our mom has never been someone to lie to make herself look better, and that my brother looked pretty much exactly like my dad in an old army photo, we believed our mom. So my brother gets an Ancestry DNA test done, and he's got no German ancestry at all, even though our dad's side of the family is super German. But things happen. DNA comes out weird. Then I get a test done, and he showed up as a close match, but with 99% certainty a half-sibling. So we dig into this a little more, and my half-sister from my dad's side son shows up on mine, but not his. She's there too now, only on mine. All the cousins on my dad's side showed up on mine, but not his. The relatives we have in common are our mom's family. So we're left with the certainty that our mom has been wrong all these years. Again, I swear to you that this woman does not lie to make herself look better. It just doesn't occur to her. I mean, I was in elementary school when she told me I was the result of a drunken attempt to get her ex-boyfriend to leave his wife for her. This woman is really a lot more honest than she should be by all rights. So we've actually decided not to raise the issue with her. Either she's gone 50 years not knowing the actual father of her oldest child, or there's enough trauma there to make an unusually honest woman lie. This is just one more small bit of weirdness in our family anyway. My brother's legally my uncle. He was adopted by our grandparents, so biologically he's my brother, but legally he's my uncle. Okay, I feel like it needs to be stressed more how considerate and selfless it is of you to not bring this up with your mom. Most people who find out this kind of information would go straight to their parents and demand an explanation because they care more about knowing why. But you've been very open-minded and considerate on why she may not have said anything about this, whether intentionally or not. I strongly support your decision to just live and let live.
Story 2. Not my story, but someone very close to me discovered that none of the ethnic background that they were expecting was present in the results. This person, whose father was deceased at the time, questioned their mother. The mother admitted that the person's father was not biological as they believed their entire life. They were older than 40. The mother gave the name of the biological father. My friend then found the biological father, contacted him, and then discovered that they had several half-siblings. The biological father was unaware he had another child and accepted my friend into his family, as did the siblings. This definitely caused a big rift between my friend and their mother, though. My friend was an only child also. Their childhood would have been completely different with siblings. For better or for worse, it doesn't matter. My friend was denied that choice. Story 3. I was adopted and always knew I was adopted. My parents told me that I came from a family that had already had all of their kids. They lived several towns over. I was a surprise. 3 years ago, my wife decided to take some DNA tests. I figured, what the heck, maybe I'm part Zulu warrior. That'd be cool. When the test came back, I found out I had a first cousin. They had listed a public email, so I emailed them, started comparing notes, and wham, I was in for quite a surprise. First, I was not born into a traditional family. Instead, my biological mom was single. Second, I was not a late addition. I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. I was a baby, but only by a couple of years. Third, most of them lived nearby. And finally, nobody knew I was alive. My biological mom had passed. She had kept the pregnancy secret from everybody else. Before she passed, she had confided in one of my bio sisters that she had a baby a long time ago, and she had put the baby up for adoption. She told nobody else. When my sister told the rest of the family, they didn't believe her, so when I finally looked him up, she was like, "See, all those years, I told you so, we have a baby brother." It was an amazing experience. I had no idea what I was getting into when I sent that DNA test off. Story 4. My aunt discovered that her mother cheated on her father and she was a product of that affair, meaning she was actually only half-siblings with her 4 siblings. The rub was that my aunt's husband was married before he married her. The woman he was married to was the daughter of the man involved in the affair. So no one knew this, but my uncle got divorced and then married his ex-wife's half-sister. I guess he has a type. My aunt equals A. Her mom, my grandmother, equals GM. Her dad, my grandfather, equals GF. My aunt's husband, my uncle by marriage, equals U. My uncle's ex, my aunt's half-sister, equals X. A took a DNA test and found out GM cheated on GF with another man. A has 4 siblings that she thought were 100% blood related, but turns out they're all only half siblings. The big surprise was that the man that GM had the affair with is the father of X. A knew X growing up and never liked her. X and U were married but got divorced, so now, years later, A finds out that this woman she did not like and used to be married to her husband is actually her half-sister because of the affair. So U seems to have a type since he unknowingly married 2 women who were half-sisters. I think that's more clear. It's complicated. Wow. Did it cause any problems with the family finding out the mother cheated? Did your aunt and her half sister develop a relationship? There's just so many questions here because of all the complications. Story 5. Not me, my wife. A few years ago, my wife and I both took the 23andMe test. One of her matches came back with 23%, which is high for someone non family. She messaged him and they started talking. He was about 10 years older, said he was adopted, and the only thing he knew was some biological info. From his age, that would have put her mom at around 14, but her mom never said anything about it. So the 2 options were her mom got knocked up young or grandma had a secret love child. So she asked her youngest uncle, who said when he was a kid, he remembered his sister going away for a few months because she was quote-unquote sick, and the family just pretended it never happened. He also said that before his mom, my wife's grandmother, passed, she told him all about it. So my wife now has a brother, a sister-in-law, and nieces and nephews. My mother-in-law is still around, but my wife does not have the best relationship with her. So my wife wanted to make sure she had all the information before she even approached her mother about this. Because in my wife's words, her mom, quote, she's a few crayons short of a full pack. But yes, they talked about it, and after trying to change the subject several times, her mom finally told her what we already figured out. Story 6. That my grandmother was biracial. She was abandoned shortly after birth at a church by an older white lady, adopted by a white farmer with 11 kids, and stopped talking to most of that family due to nondescript unpleasantness as an older teen. She passed away 20 years before I was born and looks like Maya Rudolph in the new photos I've seen, but insisted she was part Sicilian. My father and his brother both look more white than not. My father worshipped the ground she walked on and never questioned her ancestry. My uncle was always pretty sure she was black and argued with her a lot. Both dad and uncle ended up being super active in the civil rights movement and still are devoted to anti-racism work nearly 60 years on, which largely stem from these discussions growing up. Anyway, my mom, divorced from my dad, got me a DNA test a few years ago. My grandmother was definitely half black. I have no Sicilian or Italian DNA. I've connected with a few black distant cousins over email and Zoom. Story 7. Not me, but a friend. My friend, 34, female, decided to get her twin sister and parents a DNA testing kit for Christmas. When her parents opened the gift, they looked at each other and said, "Oh, thanks." They quickly tried to move on to other presents, and my friend was slightly confused but dropped it. Later, they went for their Christmas Day walk. The mom and sister were walking ahead while she walked with her dad. Her dad spilled the beans. She and her sister were adopted. The mother looked back and started crying. She couldn't believe her husband told her daughter without them talking about it first. They were going to keep it a secret forever. She had never suspected she or her sister were adopted because they do look a lot like their parents. They're also very short, as are their parents. Whoops. Well, I mean, if she decided to get a DNA testing kit, she might have already known, or at least had a hunch. And since you're halfway through the video already, I would super appreciate it if you hit that like button for this video and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss out on my upcoming videos. It really helps me out. Thanks a lot. Let's go ahead and get back to the stories. Story 8. My grandmother was the world's sweetest person and had a horrible, horrible woman as a mother. Her father, though, was incredible. She always talks about how I remind her of him, the small and sweet things they did together, and how much she misses him. Recently, she told me that her mother would tell her, quote, "He isn't your real father, you know," whenever she felt like hurting my grandmother some more. This continued until the day she passed, and her father escaped her mother's cruelty and never spoke to my grandmother again. My Nana doesn't blame him at all and still loves him very, very much to this day. She decided to go on Ancestry because she said that she needs to know before she passes, although she said it wouldn't change anything about how she felt about him. Turns out her mother was right. My grandmother found her biological family and loves to talk about her French heritage that she's now learning about. To this day, she doesn't hold anything against her non biological dad. He took care of my grandmother when her mother wouldn't, knowing it wasn't his child. He loved her, soothed her, and nurtured her through as if she was his own, and he made sure she thought she was. He saved my grandmother's spirit, I'll tell you that much. He helped shape her into the most ridiculous human being I've ever met. And to this day, I'll always refer to him as my great-grandfather, and if I have a son, I'll be naming him after him. This story always gets me teary-eyed, but the thought of Alistair, my Nana's pretend dad, always makes me really happy. I know what makes her happy too. Story 9. My sister did one through 23andMe maybe 1 or 2 years ago now and discovered we had a cousin. His profile was public because he had been adopted and was hoping to reconnect with his birth family. We were able to figure out that he would have belonged to my dad's sister. My sister wasn't sure how to bring it up with her, so she asked my dad if he could talk to his sister about it, but he dragged his feet a bunch, so my sister eventually had to let her know. It turns out she got pregnant in college back in the 60s, and the father bailed, so she went to stay with a friend across the country, had the baby, and put him up for adoption. She ended up telling her parents years later, and they were like, "Oh, okay, thanks for telling us," and never brought it up again because they are extremely repressed. She had also told her husband prior to their marriage, and when their kids were teenagers, they had been filled in as well, so it wasn't a huge family secret. It was just one the extended family didn't really know about. Anyway, my sister put our new cousin and our aunt in touch. He had done the DNA test, hoping to learn more about his medical history, but also because he wanted to let his birth parents know that they made a great decision and he had an amazing adoptive family and had a really happy life and had no bad feelings towards them. That was a huge relief for my aunt because she had always worried about that. The two of them have built a great relationship now and see each other very often. I haven't met him in person yet, but several of my family members have, including my dad. My aunt and dad and grandma have all become close to his adoptive parents too, as well as our cousin's wife and kids. His birthday was actually the day before yesterday. I'm Facebook friends with him and saw it there. Story 10. My wife no longer knows who her father is. We are about to approach her mom about this, but that's a delicate relationship balance to approach due to her mom being very straight-laced and proper. It shook my 45-year-old wife's entire foundation. She was from 6 generations of Texans. Now she is lost. I don't know how to help her. She's not really interested in finding out who her real father is yet. She is also relieved because the man she thought was her father is a weird a-hole. I wish her quote-unquote dad, her mom's current husband of 40 years, was her real dad, though he legally did adopt her years ago when the guy she thought was her dad abandoned her. It's a mess. Hard pass on the DNA tests for me. I'm good at being just 90% messed up. Story 11. So I live in a very small town, and when I was about 9 or so, I went to my friend's birthday party. This girl hung out with another group of girls, so I didn't know everyone there too well. I'm not sure how we got on the topic, but one of the girls told me her dad's name was Steve, and she wasn't allowed to talk to him. And I was like, huh, that's weird. I have a cousin named Steve, and you kind of look like his son a bit. I asked my mom to send a picture of Steve, and the girl said, well, that was her dad. Obviously, I didn't understand very well, but I told my mom that Steve was my new friend's dad. She told me not to say anything about it. Well, Steve had been remarried for many years at this point and had 2 sons only a few years younger than me, so for Steve to be my friend's dad, that meant that he would have had to have cheated on his wife. I didn't think about this for many years, and we all sort of blew it off. I never really hung out with this new friend again, and she grew up to have a very difficult life. I know her family struggled financially and her mom was out partying, it seemed. The poor girl was even found in a video that ended up circling in the town. Meanwhile, Steve is living in a very nice, large house. His kids have everything they need, and he is living the life. So I do 23andMe and the friend is a suggested match as my cousin. I sent her a connection request and I'm waiting for her to accept it. I'm not really sure if I should mention it to Steve or what. I told my parents only. I just feel so horrible that had Steve stepped up and fathered this girl as he did his other children, her life could have been drastically different, or at the very least paid her mother child support. Story 12. Not me, but my brother in law put my nephew's test results on Ancestry and got a match that someone nearby had a genetic match. His dad was something of a womanizer, so he figured maybe his dad had had a kid in a nearby city on the down low back in the day. Contacts a person, turns out it's a woman he knows because my nephew has been in a class with this woman's son. He tries to be gentle in asking about her family. She tells him straight up, "Oh, I'm the product of a casual romantic encounter. His name was my dad's name." My BIL is like, "That's my wife's father." Turns out my dad had hooked up with her mom since while on a brief return from being overseas in the Marines. Her mom got pregnant and married another guy who was happy to raise her as his own. My dad never saw the woman again. Funnily enough, he also got another woman pregnant within a few weeks and married that woman. My oldest sisters are only about 5 weeks apart but didn't know of each other until they were in their 50s. Story 13. My friend was adopted through a closed private adoption. Her adopted parents got her an ancestry test for Christmas a few years ago. She matched with her birth mom and half sister, then made contact through Facebook. After trying to get basic family info and medical history, my friend has lots of health problems, including cancer. It became clear that her birth mom was keeping secrets. Another friend of my friend did some searching online and found the birth dad and made contact against my friend's wishes. Turns out the birth mom had slept with her brother-in-law and gotten pregnant. My friend was given up for adoption to hide the secret. It caused some scandal in their family and my friend no longer talks to them. She did meet her birth dad and he was a nice guy. Turns out he and his wife wanted to keep my friend, but the mother didn't give him a chance. I didn't read that as trying to take the child away from the mother. The mom was already giving the child away and dad wanted to have the child. Mom just didn't let him. Story 14. This sort of happened to my grandma and my mom by extension. So earlier in December of 2023, one of my uncles, aunts, I'm not sure who, took the test, but they got contacted by someone who was quote unquote related to them, but they didn't know who this was at all. The name didn't ring any bells, nor the last name. So it turns out my mom has a half sister. My grandma had a kid when she was in her teens and so had the kid in secret and put her up for adoption. Never talked about it, never discussed it. My mom and us kids were completely blindsided. The only people who knew this kid existed was my grandma's family. So now my grandma had to take the test to confirm that it's her daughter. It was a wild ride in December for our family. LOL. Story 15. I found out my paternal grandfather was not my real grandfather and that my father was the product of an affair or something else. I found the entire family I am related to. My last name isn't really accurate. I was told I was an ethnic group I always thought I never looked like. I think my father's sister knew just looking back, but that he never did. I found cousins on that side, but sadly, due to my age in my 50s, most relatives had passed away and my real grandfather passed in 1969. This explains why I never met any great uncles or aunts on my father's side of the family. They basically had nothing to do with us. I found evidence in newspaper articles that my grandmother, real, knew and step/adoptive grandfather's family knew the family I would be related to. They were all from the same town. I have no contact from my family, so no one found out. What is weird is I thought I was adopted for years. I joined Ancestry to find out if I was and always thought my last name was just, I don't know, wrong. Real grandfather was a very busy man. I had relatives all over the place. One grew up in foster care and knew nothing of her real parents. He would have been her real father. Story 16. Not actually DNA, but related. Obligatory, not me, but my coworker, Bob. Very proud Polish heritage guy, unusual Polish name, plays accordion, brought in great food back when we had potluck days at work. This is all pre-DNA testing. Bob made a habit of trying to find relatives by looking up his name in phone books at the library before he went on any trips. We had to go to KC on business, and he found people with his unusual last name in a suburb. He called them, all seemed well, and he decided to skip a day of the conference to meet them. Bob and I are waiting outside the hotel. He was super excited and wanted me to meet them. And a big pickup shows up, and a pair of black guys climb out and look confused, as does Bob. Introductions are made a bit awkwardly. Everyone takes a breath and realizes that all three guys are practically identical. They could be photo negatives of each other. They even had on baseball caps with the same truck logo. Well, they decided to roll with it, and Bob left with them. The next morning, he tells me they took him to a big family barbecue, complete with accordions, beer, and singing Who Stole the Kishka. Seriously. The upshot was that his great times ex-uncle fought for the Union in the Civil War and didn't go home to New York. He proceeded across the U.S., working his way west, sharing rich Polish traditions and DNA with a variety of ladies along the way. Bob's been back to KC 4 times in the last 30 years for reunions. His family startled the first time, but when greeted with Nezdrawi or something phonetically similar, and a Slivovitz push into your hand, they felt right at home. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the video so far, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you're going to enjoy the next one that you should be watching. What's your dark family secret? Story 2 is unbelievable. I'll see you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.